Welcome, welcome. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is James Sackey. Today I am joined by Mr. Brandon Newton. He is the State and Local Tax Senior Manager from Whitley Penn. He's joining me today for a quick interview and going to give you guys a little bit of a teaser of what's to come on the panel at the upcoming Dallas Business Symposium. Brandon, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing well, James. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's get right to it. If you're ready to go, talk to us a little bit. What's one misconception you believe business leaders have about the impact of tax reform, workforce mobility, et cetera, on their companies?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to answer your questions today, especially this one from a state and local tax perspective. As you mentioned, that's where my expertise lies, and so I'm going to answer these questions from that perspective. And I think there are kind of a couple of them that dovetail off of an initial misconception. And you mentioned kind of workforce mobility and stuff, and the misconception that there's not a filing requirement in states where the company doesn't have a permanent business location or a permanent employee. Remote employees or employees traveling for a specific job, even just one job, or selling via e-commerce platforms or hiring contractors are typical ways in which companies establish a filing requirement, what's called nexus in state. And so my job and my colleagues in state and local tax arena, our job is to kind of evaluate the risk as it relates to, okay, there's a filing requirement. Now what's the risk of filing or not filing in that particular state? And that can, and we quantify that risk and everything. And then the kind of second misconception that we see, again, a lot of times as we're onboarding new clients is, okay, there's a filing requirement in state B, and I am domiciled in state A. And so what if I just over apportion or pay more tax to state A to compensate for state B? I mean, we see that often. It's a common misconception, and that's not an effective way to deal with that risk and stuff. Now that doesn't mean that there's not a decision made not to file in state B, but that risk is separate from state A. So I think just kind of boil it down, common misconception is where there is risk and then how to deal effectively with that risk on a state by state basis, if I can kind of summarize my answer for you there.
Yeah, for sure. And I imagine the more states you're operating in, the more complex it can get. I can imagine very quickly that would get hairy pretty fast.
Yeah.
Great. So let me ask you this. Let me kind of shift a little bit. How do you personally stay ahead of changes in your field? And then what advice would you give to business leaders looking to do the same?
Yeah. Yeah, a number of different ways. In my space, obviously deal with states, basically all 50 states and various local jurisdictions as well. And so there's always kind of a change that we're looking at, and so it's important that we have regular updates that we're looking at. There are various industry periodicals, Bloomberg Tax and Tax Notes Today, that send out daily updates and kind of stay informed of the big news in that way, as well as kind of attending industry events such as, like, just even yesterday I was in Austin for the annual Texas Comptroller briefing, kind of getting the updates from the Texas State Comptroller as in terms of administrative updates and things of that nature, and kind of procedural updates as well as it relates to challenging audits and things like that. So kind of making myself available to attend those sort of things, or webinars and stuff, as well as podcasts that are given by law firms that are relevant to my work. I think in terms of advice outside of my particular field, I think it'd be kind of specific to everyone's field, but kind of know who the thought leaders are, and then find out how to access them. Whether it's a podcast or whether it's industry periodicals or what have you. I guess in my case as well, one of the other things I do is keep tabs on legislative and administrative developments. I mentioned the Texas Comptroller update yesterday, but then also what drives a lot of our work are legal developments on a state-by-state basis. And so I've got alerts set up for various Texas tax cases that are working their way through the Texas courts. And so I'll see whenever there's a new briefing filed or a decision made on those and stuff. So anyway, yeah, just kind of encourage everyone to know who your industry thought leaders are, as well as kind of how can you get information from various whether it's governmental entities or whoever's kind of driving the decisions in your line of work.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like you've got quite a beat on this pulse too. That's good to know that somebody's paying.
I like to think so.
Sure. Okay, so let's focus a little bit more on the middle market companies. What specific challenges do you believe middle market firms face that the larger ones don't typically experience as much when it comes to things like capital gains or state and local taxes and stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll focus on state and local taxes again, since that's what I know best. I think smaller and middle market companies are faced more with the administrative burdens, or I should say the administrative burdens are larger for them, a heavier lift for them, especially as it relates to sales taxes. Obviously sales taxes aren't imposed, or I should say on a multi-state basis, aren't imposed on the seller. It's a trust tax that's imposed on the ultimate buyer. But smaller and middle market companies having to register in these states and figure out what's taxable and what's not in various states, that's definitely an administrative burden on a lot of them. Payroll tax issues as it relates to tracking employees that are either remote employees or doing work in multiple jurisdictions. That's a huge administrative burden for smaller and mid-sized companies. And then also I think, and this is something that we've helped out with a lot, is finding opportunities in the forms of deductions or credits that are industry specific and kind of narrowly applied. And that's one of the areas where we've been able to help out those smaller and mid-sized companies and stuff who maybe just don't have the resources to, whether it's capacity and or just the state and local tax know-how to find those and then file for refund claims, etc. I know the Texas franchise tax especially has some industry-specific exemptions and as well as sourcing rules and things like that. And so that's a big part of what we do. And small and mid-sized businesses are kind of our sweet spot. We've been able to add value just because those sort of things are tougher for those businesses to kind of know about and stuff, and then be able to execute on.
For sure. It's always the little guys, man. And I'm glad that there's agencies like yours that are out there to support. Okay, last question. If you could change any one aspect of the current regulation or the market or the business climate that we're in, especially around tax reform, what would it be and why?
Yeah, this is a good question, I think, especially from a state and local tax perspective. And maybe it's not policy driven so much as it is kind of where our attention is and what gets the publicity. There's been a lot of publicity recently. Probably a lot of the listeners here have seen various studies or articles in even the Wall Street Journal about the net migration possibly driven by personal income tax rates. And over the last 5 to 10 years, individuals moving from higher tax states to lower tax states, specifically personal income taxes, right? And there might be something there. There appears to be at least some level of correlation there, but I think we need to look more broadly at that and understand that the tax base a lot of times is made up of many different taxes, right? Sales taxes, obviously a large one, production taxes, property taxes, generally a more local level and stuff. But I mean, here in Texas, the sales tax base makes up 60% of the overall tax collections. That's a large amount. And then it's even more, 77% when you factor in sales taxes on vehicle sales and rental taxes and the oil production taxes. So over 3/4 of our tax base is well, there's no individual income tax, but is kind of production and sales tax related in Texas. Louisiana, for example, Governor Landry ran on the platform of wanting to repeal state income taxes. Well, 45% of their tax base is made up of income taxes, corporate and individual income tax. So how's that going to be compensated for in the tax base? And what we've seen is that in a lot of cases, when a state lowers their income tax rate, they'll make up for that with an expansion in the sales tax base, whether that's legislatively or administratively. Texas certainly has taken an aggressive approach in some cases on its sales tax base. And so, I think, and again, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad policy, right, to move from an income tax base to a sales tax base. I'm just kind of saying we need to make sure that we give proper attention to the whole scope of the tax base and not just focus in on the income tax rate specifically.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, that will do it for this session. Brandon, I appreciate you, and we are definitely looking forward to unpacking some of these in a little bit more detail, or quite a bit more detail, actually. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Whitley Penn, for supporting the Dallas Business Symposium. For those of you that are watching, hopefully this is interesting, and we will be diving into this more during the panel session, and you can still get your tickets. They are still for sale on early bird until next week. You can go to jamessaki.marketing and get your ticket now, and we will see you on the 4th.